Today's lesson is going to focus on figurative language. One of the most captivating aspects of good literature is the use of figurative language, or ideas communicated beyond their literal meaning to create an image in the reader's or audience's mind. There are several types of figurative language, also called figures of speech. For this exercise, you will use the following figures of speech: metaphor, which is a comparison of two things that are not similar, but trying to create a comparison; a simile, which is a comparison made between two unlike things using the words like or as; or personification, which is giving human qualities or characteristics to non-human objects. All right. So today, you're going to read each quote from part 2 on this page here. You're going to look for the underlined figure of speech in the sentence, and then you're going to decide which type of figurative language is being used. Finally, you're going to look at the comparison of the two things, the figure of speech and what it's talking about in the text, and you're going to provide an analysis. All right. Got a couple of examples for you here today, and we're going to do a couple of them together. So let's take a look. If you don't have your study guide out already, please pause this video, turn to page 35 of your study guide, or if you're on the online study guide, slide 38, and we'll take a look. All right, so we see here in our example, it uses the quote, each page becomes a black butterfly. Beautiful, eh? Light the third page from the second, and so on, chain smoking chapter by chapter. There sat Beatty, perspiring gently, the floor littered with swarms of black moths that had died in a single room. All right, so in this excerpt, Captain Beatty is talking to Montag, and he's lighting pages of a book on fire, and he's using, as we see here, a metaphor to help convey an image to Montag. All right. So with this one, it says Bradbury compares the burnt pages of the book to a swarm of black moths as the page lie there dead from the fire. All right, so Bradbury's trying to create an image in your mind where we can all imagine a bunch of black moths lying dead on the floor, all right, and covering the floor. All right, they were once flying, now they're not. All right, in the same way, when you light pages on fire, right, the burnt page pieces kind of float in the air for a minute, and then they fall and on the ground where they don't move anymore. So he's saying that those pieces of the pages floating in the air as they're burning are like the black moths, and then the pages on the floor lie dead on the ground like black moths. Not that they're actually dead, but that they're no longer what they were. They're no longer pages anymore. All right. So let's take a look at the next one here. We'll do a few together, all right, and then you'll do the rest on your own. All right. So number 1 says, she was beginning to shriek now, sitting there like a wax doll melting in its own heat. All right. Now, if I'm looking at this one to figure out if it's a metaphor, comparing two unlike things, a simile, comparing two unlike things using like or as, or personification, giving human qualities to an inanimate object, all right, I noticed that it has the word like right here in the middle of the page, or middle of the sentence. All right, the word like is right there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to know that's going to be a simile, so I'm going to put here in the next figure of speech. All right, for those doing their online version, you can use a text box. Again, make sure you resize it to fit. All right, she is using a simile as her figures of speech. The author is here talking about Mildred. All right. And then for my analysis here, so it says sitting there like a wax doll melting in its own heat. All right. The author knows that we could probably imagine, right, a doll made out of wax, like a candle. All right. When a candle burns, when the wick burns, the wax melts away slowly. All right. And so a doll made out of wax set in the heat too long would also start to melt. All right. Wax dolls were a common thing back in this time period that the book was written, back in the 1950s. Right. So, and you can imagine, if a wax doll was alive and they were melting, they would probably be screaming very loud and in a very panicked manner. All right. So, for my analysis here, that I would say something like, just like a wax doll melting in the heat would shriek and panic as it melted if it were alive. Mildred is also shrieking. Alright. And so there's my analysis for this one. All right, just as if a wax doll was a living creature, all right, and it was melting, it would be shrieking and panicking because melting would mean it is, for better lack of a better term, dying. All right, same thing here with Mildred. All right, let's take a look at number 2. There were people on the suction train, but he held the book in his hands, and the silly thought came to him: if I read fast and read all, maybe some of the sand will stay in the sieve. All right. All right. So in this case, again, we're looking for metaphor, comparing two unlike things. Uh, Simile, comparing two unlike things using like or as, or personification, where you are giving human qualities to an inanimate or non-living object. All right. So what I see here is the underlined part. It says maybe some of the sand will stay in the sieve. Okay. As we read earlier in the chapter of part 2, we saw that Montag talked about how his cousin had offered him a dime if he could fill a sieve, one of those metal mesh tools that's used to sift flour in baking, right, to get it to a real fine powder. All right, that his cousin said, I'll give you a dime if you can fill this sand, or fill this sieve with sand. However, since a sieve is metal mesh, the sand would not stay in the sieve, and so it was a pointless activity. Montag was never going to get that dime because he was never going to be able to fill the sieve because the sand would fall out the bottom as fast as he filled it. All right. So in the same way here, we have the author's comparing Montag trying to read and retain the Bible, which is the book that he's holding, trying to quickly read and retain the knowledge from the Bible while riding on this train, to trying to fill a sieve with sand. All right. So comparing those two things, there's no like or as, so it's going to be a metaphor. All right. Over here and put metaphor. All right. And then for my analysis. Right. As we discussed in class when we read this, all right, we said that because of the way that this society has been raised, the way the children are taught, the way that the people are treated, that they struggle to understand text. They can't comprehend the text. All right, so I'm going to start with that. Because the citizens were never taught to comprehend literary text, Montag is unable to make sense of the text enough to retain the information. The knowledge falls out of his head as quickly as he reads it. Alright, let me adjust my text box here just a little bit to get all of that information in here. Alright, so again, as we talked about before, right, Montag's trying to read, he is unable to make sense of it and therefore cannot retain the information. So he's reading the words, he's just not being able to remember any of them and comprehend them because he can't make sense of them. But he's trying to. So it's like in the same way he's trying to pour knowledge into his head, and the knowledge is just falling right back out again, just like he's pouring the sand into the sieve and it's falling right back out again. All right, he doesn't have enough time to learn to read and retain. All right. Let's look at number 3 real quick, and then we'll go on and let you do the rest on your own. All right, number 3 says, the train radio vomited upon Montag. In retaliation, a great tone load of music made of tin, copper, silver, chromium, and brass. All right, so here we've got the part that says train radio vomited. Okay, so again, I have comparing two things. Now, a train radio can't actually puke or vomit or throw up like humans can. All right. All right, so in this case, we do have a little bit of personification because it's giving a non-living object, such as a train radio, human qualities. All right. All right, and it's giving a non-human object, a non-living object, human qualities. All right, a train radio can't vomit or throw up like a human can. All right, this is also a bit of a metaphor as well, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. All right, so when a person vomits or throws up, all right, they basically just expel everything that's inside of them in one mass of disgustingness, as I'm sure you may have seen before. All right, you can't really tell what the food was that the person took in because it's all been jumbled up and processed in their stomachs and broken down by the acid. It's just one giant blob of a mess. All right. In the same way, all right, this train radio wasn't producing any coherent music. There was no melody to follow, no lyrics, no distinguished pieces that you could enjoy like we do in music today. All right, it was just a bunch of random noise that just was there to distract the person. All right, so in my analysis, I would write that. All right, just like when a person vomits, you cannot distinguish what they ate, and that they have now vomited. It is just one blob of mess. In the same way, the train radio produced sounds that were just noise. There was no distinguishable melody, tune, or lyrics. All right. And so there's an element of personification. All right, and again, we said personification because the train radio has been giving human qualities of being able to vomit. That is a human or a living creature process. But he's also comparing what the train radio was doing to what a human would do if they vomit. So it's kind of a mix of both personification and metaphor. Okay. All right. So on page 36, or if you're on the digital one, slide 39. All right, we have a few more of these metaphors. Go ahead, take a few minutes to complete these. All right, you can work independently, or if you want to join in the discussion board and participate with or can work on it with a classmate, that is fine too. All right, but once you finish it, send it to your teacher so that they can give you some feedback on it. And then once you complete this slide 39, or page 36, and receive some feedback from your teacher, then you're going to go on to the part 3 metaphors that we're going to see as we read part 3 today. All right, your teacher will have a link posted for you or a handout ready for you with part 3 metaphors. But finish up these part 2 metaphors, get it checked by your teacher, and then we'll look at part 3. All right, guys, look forward to seeing your work.